So, thank you all for joining us today. I'm really thrilled to have so many of you here with us. For those of you who might be new to this series, I am Heidi Schlag. I'm a heritage tourism consultant. I live in Frederick, Maryland, and I run Heritage Tourism Studio, which I use as an umbrella for my consulting work, but also as a way to just be a thought leader and a sort of agitator to try to get all of us who are working in the heritage tourism space, whether that's main streets or museums, byways, heritage areas, etc., talking together, working together to provide better visitor experiences for all of the visitors who come to our locations. So, this is my third of these talks. And if you weren't able to join us for the previous two, I'll put my link to my YouTube in the chat in just a second so you can view the last two that we hosted. And today I'm thrilled to have Heidi Kerr-Schlaefer here with me. We joked when we first met about how similar our names are. And we felt sure that we were kindred spirits and we would work together in some capacity. So I'm thrilled that Heidi, you're joining us today. I'd love it if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and your experience just to get us started.
Thank you. Thanks, Heidi. Yeah, we knew from the beginning that this we're going to meet someday in person. So, behind me, by the way, is Meeker, Colorado. That's a rural town of about 3,200 in northwest Colorado. So I just thought I'd point that out. And I apologize ahead of time. I do not know what's going on with our video. We may need a new one, but I'm sorry if I'm a little bit fuzzy to you. It's a new kind of Botox I'm using, a fuzzy video. So I started Heidi Town in 2007, and that's a blog about events, festivals, and travel in Colorado. Eventually went beyond that. I like to say that Heidi Town my blog grew up with my writing career, which actually started a year earlier in 2006. And I started freelance writing at that time. And so those two things sort of grew up. Eventually, I specialized in travel writing in my freelance as well. I started actually at a little newspaper, which is awesome. And I still like keep my toe in the newspaper world. So I eventually I went on to have columns in a number of magazines, even in Nebraska and Utah. And then the pandemic hit and travel stopped. And the travel industry stopped, not to mention the festival world, which was sort of like my bread and butter when it came to like my advertisers. So Colorado tourism got hit pretty hard, just to put that out there in case people are unaware. We were always vying for Utah. I had been going to our tourism conferences for years, and we'd always been vying with Utah on the number one place people wanted to visit, what number one state. And so we had a long way to fall, and unfortunately we did. And I think the pandemic hit different places differently, geography wise, but we had a hard time. And I feel like the industry is still coming back even 6 years later. And with AI on the scene, it's just really changed the face of Colorado tourism. So with everything happening, I decided to quit freelance writing, and I started Heidi Town Consulting in 2023 alongside keeping HeidiTown.com going. And it's two parts. So my consulting company is two parts. I do keynote speaking. I do not just keynote speaking, but the last speaking engagement I did happened to be a keynote at the NOCO Tourism Summit. But I've been farther flung to Nebraska a couple of times just to do presentations on Love Where You Live. And then also I do a secondary part of that. My work is I do tourism strategies for comprehensive plans for cities and towns, specializing in rural communities. Here in the state of Colorado, we actually have legislation that says if you have a comp plan done, your municipality has a comprehensive plan done, you actually are required by the law to have a tourism component. And so that doesn't always necessarily ring very effective for some of our smaller places. And so I love to come on board with my philosophy about um, all tourists are visitors, but not all visitors are tourists, but we all have visitors. And so I like to prefer, and I prefer to use the word visitor so that you don't turn people off right away. So that's kind of in a nutshell, my background.
Well, thanks. So much of your work overlaps with the heritage tourism field. And one thing I've found particularly interesting about what I know of your work is that you help people love the towns they live in. So you're not focused solely on the visitor or the tourist, but you're also focused on the resident. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes.
What that looks like in your work and the success you've seen?
Well, absolutely. And it really comes from years of doing Heidi Town. So I've been traveling all over road tripping. I don't get into planes. I road trip everywhere I go. And I talk to people, much to my husband's chagrin. I talk to everyone and might be in a brewery or might be in a coffee shop or it might be in a restaurant. But I would notice throughout my travels a ton of apathy everywhere I went, whereas I was like, I love your town. Your town is so cool. You have this, you have that. And they just kind of look at you with this blank stare. And this apathy became really the way I developed my presentation about love where you live. And I always point to my husband as an example of someone who Ryan grew up here in Colorado. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, which I think I saw someone from Washington State in here. I'm not sure what side of the state you're from, but I grew up in the Pacific Northwest side, way, way north of Seattle, in this very tiny little rural community where we didn't see the sun very much. So when that sunlight is streaming in my window every morning here in Colorado, 99% of the mornings, I never take it for granted. But Ryan, who's grown up with it, absolutely takes it for granted. So that's just the very like easy explanation I have of why we just take things for granted. We're not used to it. And in so many of our rural communities, we people have grown up there and maybe they left for a while, but they really that's their experience. And so they take for granted everything around them, really. They
Mhm.
take for granted that people are nice to you. That doesn't just exist everywhere. So sometimes it really just takes me getting up on a stage and being like, hey, look around you, look at this, look at that, and pointing out to them and having them recognize and going, I love, love, love the aha moment where someone goes, you're right, my town is amazing. This place is amazing that I've grown and lived in for 42 years. So really that's kind of where that community pride aspect stems from is personal experience.
Mhm. Mhm. And I know that that's something that in my work with DMOs are starting to focus in more on their communities. In past years, it's always been this focus on, the 50-mile radius
Yeah.
where they want to bring people into the town, heads and beds. But I'm hearing more and more of this conversation that the DMOs are beginning to realize what a key asset the community is, for the reasons you just pointed out, and because they're the ones interacting with with the visitors, right? As frontline staff. So, do you, when you go into those towns, do you do any sort of training with them, or is it more, inspiration and just helping them understand their place in the tourism economy?
So actually in my strategy plan work, I usually give that to most communities I've worked with so far. Durango, who happens to be in this chat, I saw Durango was here, but their downtown association actually, I think it's a DBA there, but they actually have an ambassador program that I have known him for quite a long time who works down there. So he has agreed to let me use that as the example. And I give that to different communities where they can literally train their frontline workers to know what they have, what museums are nearby. I worked with a small town in southeast Colorado, and they were surrounded by like 4 national parks slash monuments slash, these amazing places, but they're not even really quite aware that that stuff is there. So it's a really great ambassador program that Durango, Colorado has put together. So I've actually given that. I do not personally run those programs, but I give that idea to them as something that they could absolutely utilize and I do go through like how they actually do it. So yeah, and I feel like you're missing a whole component. If the DMO is just looking from the 30,000 foot level and is not getting on the ground, it's the people on Main Street who know what's happening on Main Street. They know who's coming through their doors. So if there's not a connection there, and you're just relying, if you're a small town in Colorado and you're relying on some company out of New York or even Denver to tell you how you should be doing tourism in your community, I feel like you're probably doing something wrong because it's really the people who live there. And also, I would add to that, if there are people who live there don't love where they live, it's really hard, I believe, for economic development, tourism being part of that, to work effectively in a community. Because even
Hmm.
if, I mean, with this world we live in where everything is so immediate, I tell people, even that experience that somebody had at your gas station, if that person's rude to them, and you're not going to win at all hearts, but if you can have enough people on the same page of loving where they're at, then they really just put out that better attitude towards everyone.
Well, and I'm sure we've all had the experience where somebody makes a recommendation to you, whether it's a waitress or or a shopkeeper, and they speak with such passion about whatever it is that they're recommending that that influences your stay. So that's, really something that the DMO through this training program, and Kristen says it's the bid ambassador program and says thanks for the
Yes.
shout out.
Thank you. It's so
That
good.
these types of programs can really make a difference. Um, so you mentioned in your intro this how you like to use the word visitor instead of the word tourist, especially in rural towns where they might not be as welcoming to visitors. So can you just talk a little bit about your experience there?
I've always thought for years now that tourism is kind of shooting themselves in the foot by saying tourists. I believe, especially here in Colorado, I think during the pandemic, the word tourist had got a bad name. And when we have our mountains overrun with people, and we have mountain communities that are the locals are really annoyed at all the tourists, or you have a small town like where I grew up in, and they don't think of themselves as a tourist community. I have religiously in my consulting company said right away that even in my strategies that I write, even though the strategy might be called tourism goals or tourism strategy, throughout the document, I want to always be talking about people as visitors. And when I talk to people about that within communities, because I put boots in the ground and I interview people, I interview store owners and business owners, and I tell them my philosophy. And I can't tell you how well that resonates. And if you guys all want to just steal that and go with it, that really resonates with people in a certain community that doesn't consider themselves to be a tourism community. So we have our Breckenridges and we have our Vales. I'll be in Vale this weekend. We have those kind of places. Tourism is definitely the right word to use in those circles. But when we're talking about places like Lamar, where I have worked, when you use the word visitor, everyone understands that might be someone who's just coming to visit grandma. But guess what? They're going to have an experience at the gas station. They may go out to eat and have an experience with somebody in a restaurant. So, and they may actually go to there are different things around Lamar that are historically related. They are going to have those experiences that a classic traditional tourist will have. So I think that when you say visitor, it's just an easier way to like understand who all is coming to your community. They aren't
Hmm.
all traditional tourists.
Right. Yeah. So I want to turn a little bit to your work with the Colorado byways. So I know this has been a huge project of yours for the past year or so. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing for Colorado byways, just to get us started?
So let me put on that hat. It's all connected. So I'm doing this under Heidi Town Consulting, but the itineraries are actually being posted on HeidiTown.com. So I'm working with Colorado Scenic and Historic Byways, which is a division of CDOT, and I am contracted to write 26 byway itineraries of our 26 byways here in Colorado, including in addition, I'm doing 8 blog posts surrounding that. So yesterday I just posted one regarding different agritourism and like dude ranches and stuff you can go to on the byways. So sort of incorporating those two, and it's just been a lot of it's a lot of work, but it's awesome. I've been on most of the byways. There's only one I haven't driven, and some of them I've been on multiple times. So even though I feel like I have a lot of knowledge, I'm learning so much. It's like kind of like going and getting a history degree in Colorado. And one of the main reasons I don't know if other people outside of Colorado know this, but yes, it was the 250th birthday of the United States this year, but it's also the 150th birthday of Colorado. So this is the Great American Road Trip in connection to the
Mm.
birthday of Colorado of the 150th, which we just had officially the day just passed. And I'm also 50 this year, so I'm a bicentennial baby. Um, so that whole yeah, and I'll talk real quickly about how I approach each one of them because so coming into this feeling like, hey, I've got this, I know all this stuff. That's not true. And I am very aware of that. So the first thing I do is I like to go through and take notes off the corridor management plan from each of the byways. So each byway has a corridor management plan that they put together with the state of Colorado because it's an official program. And then what I also do is I send a questionnaire out to for each byway, specific to each byway, to the committee of volunteer or committee members and the stakeholders for that byway, because I feel like those are the people, some of those people drive it every day. They're going to have more insight than I'm going to have if I was there 3 or 4 times or there once, as is the case in many of them. So yeah, so it's been a lot. I think it was probably more work than both the person I'm working for, Lenore Bates, and I kind of realized to begin with. And once I started putting them together, so it's actually it's been really fun, and it's a little reminder to me of how amazing our state is. And I know there are people from all other places around on this webinar, but I have to tell you that if you haven't been to our state, it really is the prettiest state. And I've lived in Washington and Oregon, gorgeous states, but without an ocean, if you're going to take the ocean away, we have the most amazing state here. And we have everything from your incredible mountains that are just like postcard beautiful to these little towns on the Eastern Plains that have the most amazing heritage, especially when it comes to the 250. I mean,
Mm.
this is American heritage. This is the heritage of our country. And so it's just kind of it's been an exciting way to be able to get again reacquainted with my own state.
Yeah. And you and I have talked about, and Wanda and I talked about this in the last call, how byways are often overlooked assets that they exist in every state, and in I think Colorado it actually does one of the best jobs in the country of actually promoting their scenic byways. But how have you approached that in Colorado, and then through your travels, are byways being utilized as well as they could?
I have to be careful what I say about this. It's been a little bit frustrating for me. I really was hoping to bring more tourism people to this. I think here in Colorado, I think every DMO is so dealing with we're really our state is in some financial issues right now, and so everybody's working with less, and so I
Hmm.
feel like they don't always have headspace for the byways. I
Hmm.
think also when you talk about Colorado in our past of being so tremendously like hardly have to do anything and people will come to the state. I mean, we were like really like the cream of the crop, right? And then the pandemic, and I feel like we're kind of going from this very competitive with each other to realizing that we can't be as competitive with each other. And
Hmm.
I feel like the byways will win from that because I think in the past, a different DMO was very protective of their own region. Like my money goes to this place, and I'm not going to promote this byway that's then going to send people somewhere else. And so I think that traditionally has been a very part of Colorado's fabric that has changed. It's definitely changing. And so I am hitting some difficulties, but I'm also hitting some DMOs going, Heidi, we don't have a byway. This is very exciting for me. Actually, am working with two people that they said, we don't have a byway and we would like you to come just write this, write this heritage trail for us. So it's exciting work is coming from it that I didn't realize would. But yes, I think it's hard. And in Wanda's, if people haven't listened to that, I think Wanda hit the nail on the head when she talked about how DMOs really look at, our money is used for our community. We do not send someone to some other community. And that's what byways are seen as doing. So it's hard. It's a
Yeah.
difficult subject.
Yeah, I think that I hear that all the time actually. And it is hard. And it's something I think about a lot is how the heritage tourism ecosystem is set up by organization. And it's how the money flows. But that isn't the way that the visitor explores the the destination. They don't see borders. They don't know, when they're crossing from one, DMO boundary into the next. They're focused on the experience. And so I've spent a lot of time just thinking about how we can help visitors have better experiences without tripping over the organizational boundaries that are set up
Mhm.
um, by virtue of the fact that that's how organizations and how budgets work. And I don't know the answer. Do you
Right.
have any do
Well,
you have any
I know
thoughts?
we had talked about talking about the NOCO collaboration that's happening here in
Hmm.
Northern Colorado, and I think that would be a good one to talk about in relation to this. So Northern Colorado has come together in the last couple of years and put together the Northern Colorado, it's called the NOCO Tourism Summit. And it includes multiple DMOs from Northern Colorado. They've come together, and I believe, this is me kind of from the outside, but kind of from the inside because I live here and I've known some of these DMOs for a very long time. I feel like they've realized that, hey, we understand people don't come here just to go to Estes Park or just to go to Fort Collins. They do multiple stops along the way. And I really think that this group, the ones who have really come together to collaborate, they share resources, they share ideas, and I think they've made some friendships over it. And I think that that is really key into being able to continue those conversations. And so, really, that's what it's going to take for the byways to be more effective long term in that tourism world is for community DMOs to actually realize that they're better working together.
Hmm.
And as all of our budgets get cut and everything, I think little plug, instead of looking at AI, maybe we should look to work to come together and figure out how we can share resources. I think that's probably the biggest thing right now, is being able to like, hey, I know this place, or I know that, yeah. It's just I think it really starts with that conversation. And I want to I'll also speak to this because one of, I think, the things that's this is a huge frustration for me, and it kind of came to a head last year. I had somebody I was talking to on the phone. She's like, well, let's definitely, I want to have a meeting with you. And she's like, when are you available on Zoom? And I'm like, you're literally like 2 miles away from my house. Why are we doing this on Zoom? Because you're so used to doing all of your conversations on Zoom. And so I think that the more we can actually come together and have face-to-face meetings again, like, that is going to be extremely important to the future of all business, not just tourism, but all business. Because if we think emails and Zooms are going to be the way to get things done, they're not.
Hmm.
Unless you have that personal sit down with someone. It's like I used to say, I won't be friends with you on Facebook. I've kind of gotten past this now, but I used to say, I won't be friends with you on Facebook unless we've had a beer together.
Nice.
So, so yeah.
We have a question from Carol. She said, "Can you give an example of one of the byways? What is included?" So
Okay.
pick your favorite byway and sort of
I'll
walk us
just
through
probably
it.
have to pick the one that's most recently in
That's
my
fine too.
head. So we are in our byway itineraries specifically, definitely looking at historic So that's one of our main things. Historic stops, partly because this is the Colorado 150, so we're tying it in. So definitely museums along the way. We are trying to make sure that we're telling people where all of the actual um, byway overlooks are, scenic overlooks are. You can't we have them pretty well marked. I'm really happy with even Google Maps has them marked. Sometimes I literally drive on Google Earth and I go through and I'll like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember like I'll look at it just to make sure I've got it right. So we put overlooks, we put museums. I will write a little bit about a town, which is awesome because I've been to 99% of them, and so I'm able to like say from a boots on the ground, you know, Grand Lake, for instance, has wooden sidewalks that's just like an Old West movie, you know. So I talk a little bit about that. So Heidi Town would like tell you where to stay, or this is where we stayed, this is dog friendly. I don't go into that part like as much. In fact, on my byway itineraries, I have a sort of itinerary section. And then once you get through the itinerary, there's the how to get around, transportation sections, some tips to learn a little bit more on the byways, where to stay. And we only put places that are on the National Registry or Colorado Registry of Historic Places. That way we're not, I think that way we're offending no one, right?
Right.
So that's kind of the stops. I mean, like for instance, right now I'm doing Tracks Across Borders, which is our newest byway in Colorado. And one of the stops is obviously going to be the very underknown Navajo Lake, which is on the Navajo State Reservoir. It's surrounded by reservation land. It's a little known lake, but they call it the Lake Powell of Colorado. It's so huge. I've driven by it. It's like 15 miles of you're just like, wow, this lake is still here. So um, we'll definitely put stuff like that. I'm a bird nerd, and thankfully Lenore and CDOT doesn't mind. So I will put up if there's like I put all the birding connections in there. And we all know that birders are people that take our byways, and so I know
Mhm.
that the audience is there, and so I definitely do recognize some of the birding places around Colorado, which I'm even learning about some more ones. So I hope that answers the question a little bit. There's a lot in there. I would say if you really wanted to see what's in the byways, just go to HeidiTown.com and go to one of the itineraries, and you can just kind of browse through it and see everything because they're all following the same pattern.
Mhm. Um, I have like two different questions floating around in my head at the same time. Um, let's talk, let's go back to what you were talking about with the collaboration of the counties, NOCO, I think you called it.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, I think what one thing that is really interesting and useful from those regional collaborations is that it's sort of it gets hard for locations that are located in the same region of the same state to differentiate themselves from each other. Um, and when working collaboratively, I feel like that gives you a better opportunity to differentiate yourself from other regions. So I'm just curious, have you had any experience sort of, working with those collaborations and just helping them to define what makes them unique?
I think that is a huge subject, and it's one that I personally take very seriously in my strategies because I do think every town is unique. However, you can go to six different towns in the Colorado Rockies, and they all have a mining history, right?
Hmm.
So, it's like yes, we say they're unique, but how are they unique? And when
Right.
we're talking about collaborations, it really is just putting your boots on the ground in that other community. It really is just walking those streets and seeing how they feel different
Hmm.
than the streets in my place. Now they may feel really the same here in northern Colorado, but between Fort Collins and Loveland, you have a massive, CSU is in Fort Collins. It's a community of a lot of college kids, right? So there's a younger vibe there. Loveland is going to have a more family oriented vibe to it. So beyond history, there are just those things that are happening right now. How many boutiques are downtown? I've been in a town in it's actually Belfouche, South Dakota, And it was just humorous to me that every single town was a Western wear shop. And I was like, I had several discussions on how do all the Western wear shops stay open?
Mhm.
And that's a whole nother discussion because they do have a way they do it. But it's, so I think, yeah, I think just, oh, I'm such a boots on the ground person. I don't think it's possible to, this is so a rant of mine, and it's a little bit me getting on my pedestal, but if you're a consultant and you're not physically in a town, I think it's much harder for you to have any understanding of that community. And that's
Mhm.
me being a little judgy, I know, but it really is. I don't think the ideas from over here, they will help. Yes, a few of those ideas are going to help, but if you don't commingle them, you're definitely never going to find that unique selling proposition of a specific community. So
Mhm.
I'm not going to get on that tangent.
Um, if anybody in the room has questions or comments for either of us, please put those in the chat while we keep talking. And Heidi, I'll ask you for the people listening who might be, this conversation has started them thinking, what makes my town or my location, whether it's a park or a museum, different from others surrounding me? What are some of the things that you tell your clients to think about when trying to put their finger on what makes them unique?
So I think it has been really interesting for me to do that exact thing because I've been working with multiple Eastern Plains communities. And the Eastern Plains here in Colorado tend to be a very agricultural communities. They like the Rockies in some ways, who all share a little mining history. All the Eastern Plains communities share this very pioneering agricultural history. However, working with these towns and seeing what has developed over the years as far as a festival, for instance, really does help me be able to identify and start talking to them about what I've identified as their unique thing in that community that they may never have seen because, again, it's forest for the trees, right? So, the community I'm working with right now is a town of around 30, no, 3,000, 3,200. I don't know, somewhere around there. I'd have to look it up. But they have an event there. Well, first of all, of course, it's a very agricultural community. However, turns out they're pretty much the biggest agriculture community on the Eastern Plains, which I didn't know. So they have a lot going on, and they have this thing called the Old Threshers Days, and I'm really excited about this because I just talked to the president of their board yesterday, and he is really on the same page as me, and we're very excited, and he's very interested in growing it, and it really does set them apart because here's what I think about their community. They have somehow been able to maintain this very successful agricultural base. Whereas you have other communities that are struggling because we all know the family farm is struggling. We all know ag is not an easy business to be in. But they have somehow been able to embrace innovation and really turn ag into something that is really part of their culture from a historic point of view into a modern day point into the modern day. And I feel like that is just something that I figured out in their community that makes them uniquely their community, and sets them apart from all the other little towns, right? And can I expand on this real quick about
Absolutely.
old?
Yeah.
So it's Old Thresher Days, and it was founded in 1981. And literally, a farmer in his back 40 or whatever found an old thresher machine in his back 40. So he got his friends together and he said, "Hey, do you want to come over and see if this thing will still work? Still, let's thresh some hay." And so basically, that's how the festival got going, right? And talking with this guy yesterday, most of our communities have these kind of festivals, a lot of them that have roots that are very, very a
Mhm.
long ways in our history. 81 isn't even as long as I've seen some other ones. However, I feel like when we take these events and we want to let's talk about heritage tourism. We want to turn them into something that will produce economic success for our community. We need to walk softly. This is a community, for instance, where there are people still alive that put this together originally. We want to be respectful of those people.
Mhm.
We want to respect that they put this together, walk softly. And if that is done in a very intentional way, then I think it can be a beautiful thing for that community. But we can't go in there just thinking you're going to change everything and you're going to
Mhm.
make Old Threshers Day something that's going to be on PBS and we're going to have this big national show about it. It's going to be amazing. And all these people from hundreds of miles are going to come to it. And that's not what we want. We want to
Mhm.
grow it in a thoughtful way so that we're still giving respect to where it came from
Yeah.
and what it means to that community's culture.
Yeah. I love that. I think doing those events around that differentiator, especially if it's something historic, really is a great way to not only generate tourism, and like you said, you're not trying to bring hundreds of thousands of people to the town, but you're generating some of that economic development, but you're also helping to educate your community. So,
Yeah.
going back to how we started this call, getting people to love where they live, part of that is helping them to understand their heritage.
Connecting their heritage to, in this community, connecting their heritage to their modern day culture.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I
So,
think when people who are residents of that community can see that connection, that gives them pride, extra
absolutely.
pride in where they're from.
Yeah. So we have a few comments and questions. So Harriet says, I could really resonate with the observation that you need to make personal connections with people, not expect emails, etc., to be productive. So um, a wholehearted yes to that. Kelly says, I am currently working with a region that is embracing the intersection of outdoor recreation and agritourism. The region itself is nearly 150 miles from point to point. Your conversation on differentiating towns within a region is very relevant to ongoing discussions. Could you share which differentiating factors are of most interest to visitors?
Hmm. I think when let me say this in okay. So I feel like you have so many different types of visitors. And when you're talking about byways, you generally are talking about a little bit older, not old, people
Mhm.
my age, uh, who may be a little bit of a bird nerd, or maybe you'll have some families. So each of those tourist segments are going to be interested in something different along that area, right? So we're not, I don't think she's talking about a byway, she's talking about 150 miles, and obviously there's different communities within it. But I think really in that situation, you have to figure out what strengths do particular communities have. What maybe one community has that amazing water park or something. Could even be a very small water park. I've seen those too. But it has something that really is fun for families. And that other town has awesome gravel trails for gravel bikers. And so they're going to be the place that gets that person. So I feel
Mhm.
like maybe identifying what the strengths are of the communities within that area, because the one thing that drives me nuts is when one place says they can be all things, right? You can't be all things. And I think that's partly goes back to why we collaborate with people, is because if we know we don't have the best gravel trails in Colorado, we can send them to this town that does, that is just 20 minutes up the road. But they may be staying, their head might be in a bed here in my community, but they're
Mhm.
going to go there and have lunch. I say everyone wins that situation. So I would probably start with figuring out what the strengths are of each of your communities, because there's so many different segments of travelers.
Mhm.
I see
Yeah.
that because I say that from personal experiences. My husband and I don't have kids, and so as a person who's been writing about travel, I have to realize there's a big gap in my knowledge. We're like, hey, where's the brewery? Where, that's not what every, family necessarily is going to say when you've got little kids. So everyone is coming to it a little bit differently. And you
Mhm.
have in heritage tourism, we have the history buffs. And that can just be something that they can pretty much stop in every town because every town has history in
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think so much of what we're seeing in this heritage tourism world today is people who are traveling in between destinations. So that's one thing. So they are going to have multiple kinds of experiences within a trip, but also the experience is really the most important thing. So I agree with what Heidi said that identifying what makes each place unique, what's a cool experience they could have, and maximizing that experience through customer service as well. You don't want somebody to show up and be expecting to have a really great like, boat trip, for instance. And this is actually a story I heard on a podcast that somebody signed up for this boat trip and then their boat captain was hungover and
No.
they did not have a good experience at all because of the person who was operating the boat that day. So you could have the coolest experience in the world, but if the customer service isn't there to back it up, that also impacts the visitor experience. So lots of moving parts there.
I'm going to just add something really quick to that. So if you're 150 miles and you have all these towns and they're figuring out what their strengths are, I feel like I'm doing this in one of the places I'm working with right now is what are your strengths? So this is your strength, the circle. It's really great to have all the businesses around in your community know what that strength
Mhm.
is so that they can all cater to that, right? So maybe the brewery has a bike night for gravel bikers,
Right.
or somehow hook everything together so that when someone comes into that community, they know, hey, this is awesome. This is the place I need to be because I just
Yeah.
use gravel biking because it's like it's everywhere right now in Colorado. So
But yeah, what your point is telling a cohesive story.
exactly.
And then through that collaboration, if everybody knows everybody else's areas of expertise, referrals work much better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
And then Harriet says, we're an agricultural based community also. I would like you to expand on how you feel they have embraced technology or other means to accentuate their community. I think she was talking about with the Thresher
The old
days.
dresser day, yeah.
Yeah.
So this actually kind of came all from a conversation I just had. I knew that this was a very this county has done extremely well in agriculture, not agritourism, agriculture, I almost said. And then but him and I, after having this lengthy discussion, and he's exactly my age. He's been in the business his whole life, most of his life, third generation farm owner. So he kind of made me realize that perhaps the success for this community has always been that they've embraced the new thing. If there's a new farm implement on the market, they're not going to be afraid of using that. They're
Mhm.
going to use it. They have an inventor who actually is from their area, who actually created some things that are way above my pay grade or understanding of agriculture. But so there was just a acceptance of that, he said, for years in that community that we're gonna accept the newfangled thing. And he was saying, in his experience, and this would be my experience, is that in smaller communities, change is hard. You don't want to necessarily automatically accept that. And to be honest, I don't know exactly where that comes from, other than it's a very resilient, pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of place. So yeah, that's I don't know if I have an answer for that, but
And if other people have thoughts on that or anything else we've discussed, please put them in the chat. Laura, I am traveling to Colorado in 2 weeks to visit my sister. who just moved from a tourist town, Breckenridge, to a small town, Salida.
Salida. Yep.
You've got
Oh.
me so excited to experience her new town and inspire her to experience it too, since she works at a brewery.
Ah, of course she does. Salida is a
Um,
wonderful little community. I have to say the Mountain Goat Lodge is one of my favorite destinations there. It's out on the main road in Salida, but she has tons of baby goats every spring. It's an agritourism kind of place. It's a bed and breakfast and go cuddle little goats. I also just want to say Browns Canyon is amazing hiking, and it's right there in that area. Um, there's Salida is a wonderful little community. I think that that'll be such a fun place for her to explore. Yeah.
awesome. And we have a few minutes left. And I wanted to ask you, since we were talking a little bit about technology, I wanted to just get your thoughts on AI and how you have seen AI start to change the tourism economy and how visitors are researching and planning trips.
Well, I have some DMOs on with me, so I don't want to like offend anybody. Um, I have seen it come all the way from, I was in the heyday of tourism in Colorado where, I hate the word influencer, but I was influencing before that word existed. I was writing, I had my audience, I am the mayor of Heidi Town. And so and then you had, influencers who never wrote a word in their life, but they looked cute on video. So you had that whole market come up, and now you have AI. That's the newest and the latest and greatest. And I have to be careful here. I understand why DMOs are absolutely jumping on using it. It's every, conference has every seminar is about using AI, and I'm glad that they are researching how to use it like effectively. I hope they're utilizing it in a smart way. I just think that the tourism world, I mean, like every other industry is looking for, hey, how can we do this cost effectively for our town? Most of our DMOs here are getting tax money from heads and beds. Like that's how they're surviving. And so, how can we? And so I feel like my whole AI is changing the face of people making decisions on travel really at such a fast rate. I can't really keep up with the
Mhm.
stats. In fact, I was just trying to look something up for a tourism strategy I'm working on, and I cannot figure out. There's like four sources that all contradict each other. I think that's how quickly AI is moving, and I feel like that should give us a little bit of pause and just kind of sit back and I don't know if you guys all saw on LinkedIn, there's a big marketing company, and I don't know what the name of the company is, but they worked in Tennessee. They did the marketing campaign for Tennessee, and they've
Mhm.
made a pledge not to use AI in any of the photography. Did you see
I
that on
did see
LinkedIn?
that. Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
So that kind of stuff I think is going to become really important, actually.
Yeah.
And maybe that authentic, which is an overused word that I overuse, authentic part of the storytelling that we're all trying to say is maybe going to be more significant in the future. Maybe the reality is actually going to be more interesting to people. I don't know. AI is one of those things that it gives me a little bit of a headache. But then, as you know, I used Read AI on a um, Zoom call that, like a year ago, and I was just floored at how good it was.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been paying attention to AI as it aids trip planning. And one of the things, yeah, Jennifer just said they're using it to plan trips. And one thing that has been popping in my news feed recently, because I've been clicking clicking on them,
Yeah.
is that there are a bunch of apps now hitting the marketplace that are AI generated stories. So I've downloaded one just to play with it, and it pops up a map and it has all of the places pinpointed, and you click on one and it pops up a history of what it is, that's completely AI driven. And then when I click on sources, it says this was drawn from a variety of sources on the website, so it doesn't even tell you
Hmm.
where
Yeah.
where it came from. And so I'm thinking about this how as I work with clients, I do encourage them to tell stories and to keep it personal. And now there's apps out there that are basically pulling
Yeah.
pulling those stories and plunking them into an app that isn't attributing them to
Yeah.
anything, which is not a positive way to end this podcast, but or this webinar. But I spend a lot of time thinking about how my clients, the smaller heritage organizations, the smaller towns, um, obviously we want visitors to come have the personal experience. That's the end goal. But AI is now a big factor in whether those visitors even find us in the first
Yes.
place. And I
Yes.
don't know either how all of that's gonna shake
Unless your visitors are Heidi Town residents and they come to Heidi Town for their information. I real briefly, all this work I've been doing on the byways, and I've talked to enough people, and I've heard time and time again, well, you should just, write an AI, tell AI to figure this out for you. And I don't, because uh, this is me, and then I'm edited by three people. This is going to be really clean, good information that I
Mhm.
hope, gives me good rating and the state of Colorado good rating with Google, and for being not sloppy,
Mhm.
being real good quality information out there. And so I can only hope that that kind of stuff will still resonate with people. And the backlash we're seeing makes me, just say to people, slow down a little bit.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank
If there's
you.
any other questions, we have a few minutes if people have questions. And I just want to mention that Laura, who is going to be traveling to Colorado, so we can hear all about her trip to Colorado on Wednesday, September 2nd at 1 o'clock. She's going to be my next guest. And she and I will be talking about heritage tourism and outdoor recreation, which we touched on a little bit today also. So I'm looking forward to having Laura join us in September. I can't believe that we're talking about September. So any last thoughts, Heidi, before we wrap up?
I want to thank you so much for doing this. I feel like it's something that I really feel it has such a heritage tourism has such a place, and it's almost been a little bit almost pushed away, like, oh,
Mhm.
we're interested in this new shiny thing over here. And in Colorado, I know Laura's going to talk about rec and it's going to be amazing, but in Colorado, it's been so rec oriented that I feel like heritage tourism has sort of been like, you're over there, just get over there in your corner. This is not, and so I'm really glad this conversation is happening. And I can't wait for Laura's presentation because I want to know. I feel like these two things could come together. I haven't seen a ton of that happening, but I would love to see rec figure out how we can get together with heritage tourism and make that collaboration really work for the visitor, for the visitor
Mhm.
places.
Yeah.
So that's all. I would just say thank you so much. And I love this topic. So if anyone wants to continue it with me, I will be more than happy.
Yep.
And if we could ever, not do a Zoom and have an in meeting, in-person meeting, I'm all for it.
One day. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you in September.
Thanks, Heidi.
Yep. Bye-bye.